Back in the 1800s, a certain animal known as the Phoby Cat used to terrify American frontiersmen. Teddy Roosevelt wrote that there is no wild beast in the West more dreaded by old plainsmen. And Kansas Magazine wrote in 1873 that in its bite there is death. And here's an Arizona trapper in 1911 begging the government to step in and relieve the people of the constant dread of the Phoby Cat. According to Old West hunters and farmers and lumberjacks, one nibble from this child of the devil would have you begging to be put out of your misery. This is the reputation of the Phoby Cat, the bane of the American West. And it's an animal that you've probably seen before yourself, the skunk. Yeah, the infamous Phoby Cat is really the spotted skunk of Western North America. But hey, make no mistake, this is not a case of misplaced fear or a legend being made out of nothing. No, the Phoby Cat was legitimately responsible for plenty of death out on the prairie. You see, the name Phoby Cat is just a nickname. Phoby is actually a shortening of hydrophobia, which if you don't know, is one of the primary symptoms of rabies. Now, if you don't know too much about rabies, that's totally cool. All you gotta know for this video are 3 things. 1, the rabies virus is usually transmitted to humans through the bite of an infected animal. 2, one of the main symptoms of rabies is a total fear of water, called hydrophobia. And 3, if you get bitten by a rabid animal and you don't seek medical attention, then you're dead. Untreated rabies is essentially a 100% death sentence. So, because of that, people back in the day were absolutely terrified of contracting the disease. Especially because if you're way out in the Arizona desert somewhere, you're probably miles and miles away from the nearest rabies vaccine. So, it makes sense that people would be pretty scared of animals with rabies, right? But why did the spotted skunk in particular get the Phoby moniker? I mean, how come coyotes weren't called Phoby dogs, and how come bats weren't called Phoby flyers? I mean, you can get rabies from a ton of different animals, right? So why is the skunk getting singled out? Well, this is the part where some folklore actually does come into play. See, while it is absolutely true that spotted skunks can carry rabies, the legend of the Phoby Cat goes way, way beyond just that. See, common knowledge among frontiersmen at the time was that every single spotted skunk in the world just had rabies. Like, just as a species, they were born rabid. And what's more, they thought that all cases of rabies could be traced back to the spotted skunk. Like, literally, spotted skunks were thought of as rabies patient 0. And if you think about it, it's not that hard to see why they would come to that conclusion either. See, as United States settlers manifest destinied their way across the continent, they ran into the spotted skunk for the very first time. The animal they were used to was the common striped skunk of the East Coast. So these people's impressions of the animal were a complete blank slate. Like, white American history and folklore had just not been written about the spotted skunk. And so, when cases started popping up of spotted skunks literally sneaking into people's tents in the middle of the night and biting their ears off, it didn't take long for a non-favorable opinion to form around the little animal. Especially when most of those people who got bit ended up dying of rabies not too long after the incident. And reputation just kept snowballing and snowballing until we ended up with a whole lot of writing like this. I found this in an old wildlife journal. While skunks east of the Mississippi River are of a mild type, those living west of the river are sure death. Always and permanently infected with rabies. Quite literally, an evil animal that delighted in spreading the disease. But, as I'm sure some of you have realized, there's a little problem with this kind of thinking. A bit of a bias going on, you know? See, it's not that every skunk has rabies, it's just that if a skunk actually crawls into your house and tries to bite your nose off, it's probably rabid. I mean, a non-rabid skunk is probably never going to do anything like that. It's just gonna run away from people, avoid them entirely. So, as a result, the only spotted skunks that these settlers ever really interacted with were the rabid ones, and thus the legend. By the way, that thing about a skunk sneaking into a tent and attacking you while you sleep, that wasn't just a one-off kind of story. No, that was actually pretty much the main way that these skunks would bite people. Almost every single real rabid skunk bite case I found from back during the frontier days was from a skunk sneaking into a tent and biting a sleeping person in the face. Like, here's a guy in Kansas getting bit on the hand and the ear in his sleep. And here's a guy in Arizona getting bit on the forehead. And here's a poor lady who's getting bit on the nose in the middle of a thunderstorm. And all of these and plenty more are accounts of rabid, spotted skunks sneaking into people's tents in the middle of the night. Like, this was such a common fear that I even found some funny little cartoons directly referencing the scenario. Like, here's an article about rabid skunks in an old issue of the Saturday Evening Post, and look at that. There's a drawing of a guy going to bed fully clothed to try and protect himself from skunk bites. And if that's not enough for you, here's a straight up drawing of a dude just getting chomped on at night by a rabid skunk. So, next time you and your friends are out on the prairie talking skunks, you better believe that I'm expecting you to bust out the Old West legend of the Phoby Cat. But hey, before you go, I want to drop one last little detail on you. Probably one of the craziest things that I've ever uncovered while running this channel. You see, as the legend of the Phoby Cat rose, so did a whole bunch of medicinal practices surrounding the animal. And most of these practices were concerned with not getting rabies from the bite, like supposed ways to counteract the transmission of the virus. Like, for example, some people thought that if you could get a rabid skunk to spray its smell, then you couldn't get rabies from its bite anymore. And some people thought that you could use the gallstone from the stomach of a deer to like suck the rabies out of the wound somehow. But not everybody was just concerned with avoiding the poison of the Phoby Cat. No, some people thought they could harness its power. Like Reverend Professor Dr. Entico Ellington Broccoli. I swear to God, that is actually what he called himself in his advertisements. Now, the good Dr. Professor here claimed to be able to cure pretty much any disease, any ailment, via a wide range of tonics and medicines, including African devil juice, diamond diphorus diatoms, and perhaps most critically, the concentrated essence of hydrophobic skunk juice, extracted at great expense from the skunks of the central Arizona mountains, and now being offered to you as a medicine meant to be administered via the rectum. Meaning what we got here is an advertisement from over 100 years ago recommending that you stick rabid skunk juice up your keister. Thank you for watching.